I am Sean Bagnall, and this is my display, Built for Impact, Ordnance Through Time. So, when you're talking about ordnance, you need to build for impact. Ordnance has a major effect on the wars, both World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and even the Civil War. So, in my display here, you could see everything from early dynamite and blasting caps up until advanced fuses and advanced rockets up until the 1970s. Over here, this is a display of early types of blasting caps and dynamite. You have your basic types of blasting caps, such as non-electric, electric, and safety fuses. You got explosives such as dynamite, TNT, det cord, and even a delay connector for det cord to delay the timing of the explosion. Over here, you have some basic ordnance, such as the US 40mm fragmentation grenade. Here's another example of a 40mm. The 40mm was used in the grenade launcher of a M79, and that was, I believe, during the years of around 1960 to now. Also on my table here, you see a claymore. A claymore was basically the first ever mine of this kind to work with directional anti-personnel. So this mine itself was developed by the United States in the Cold War in the early 60s. This mine became so influential and usable by the US military that they use it for the last 50 plus years. Over here, starting into the cases, we have fuses and blasting caps. So if we start up here on the top, we're starting with military blasting caps. You have World War II US Army J1 Special Engineering caps. All these caps that I have are, of course, inert and they are dummies. This box also is marked US 1944, whereas this one is a post-World War II blasting caps. These are US Army M7 non-electric caps. Moving along to these ones, these are more commercial, for commercial explosives and mining, such as Noble, who were the inventors of dynamite, if I can remember correctly. These were manufactured in Australia, Great Britain, Canada, and the rest were made within the US. Down to here, these are cutaways. These are fuse training cutaways. Basically, a fuse training cutaway were used for instructional purposes to show how the internal components of the fuse work and function. Over here, you can see a full and a half, showing you what the shell would look like on the outside and then the internal components. Here I'm looking at a M532 proximity fuse. A proximity fuse was a type of fuse that exploded when it was in proximity of something. These cutaways were very, very instrumental in the teaching process to people like EOD, military personnel, ordnance officers, and so forth. To give a key for parts of it, the initiator is the part that starts the detonation sequence. The delay mechanism is a mechanical or electrical mechanism that can delay the explosion of the fuse. Safety features, such as this little almost like wraparound wire, that is the safety. Or the detonating and firing mechanism, such as right here in the middle. The detonating and firing mechanism is the part that ultimately triggers the explosive charge in the mine or projectile used. This one right here is a Japanese shell. It is a Japanese casing shell of an artillery projectile. That came off of the bottom of the ocean. So it was called the Iron Bottom Sound. So one of the most famous battles, Guadalcanal, where it was fought over that stretch of water, they called the bottom of it Iron Sound because, say you knock on it and it's iron. It's scattered with ships and everything that they ever knocked down, planes and so forth. So this is a Japanese shell pulled from the depths around 40 years ago, before it was illegal to dive down and take it off the bottom. So if you can see, there is remnants of coral and the deterioration of the shell over the last 60 years of it being in the water. Over here is a little vial of mercury. So when you think mercury, some people think thermometers. In this case, mercury had a pretty big impact on war and warfare in general. In some cases, mercury was used as a tilt switch, to where it is a mercury switch in there, and if it's not level and it moves, it could connect the circuit. The main reason why mercury was used because it was due to its explosive and electrical properties. Since mercury fulminate was the key ingredient in detonators, primers, and blasting caps, it was highly sensitive to shock, friction, and heat, making it an ideal use for a delay mechanism or parts for initiating grenades, shells, or bombs. So this one was found up at Camp Hale here in Colorado. This is the treasure in the woods. So that is a fuse, a time fuse, most likely from a 105 millimeter, if I'm reading that correctly, and it was found in the woods to the opposite side of the road into Leadville from Ski Cooper. That was the southeast part of the Camp Hale where the 10th Mountain Division trained during World War II. So that is a projectile that one of my buddies actually found. Over here is something that we would call a presentation fuse. So a presentation fuse basically is a fuse that they would give out to someone as a presentation, as a memento of their work doing something, a thank you, and so forth. This one specifically is marking a specific milestone of this M52A2 fuse. So this fuse in this certain case was the 5 millionth one ever produced, and it was given to this guy named Mr. E.W. Rearwin. Mr. E.W. Rearwin was a person of the company in Syracuse, New York. Unfortunately, I was unable to find any information about him online, but from what I can assume was that he was either a benefactor of some sort or someone that was instrumental in the process or even the designing of it. So these mortars here, a couple of them are, so these ones are US. These, I believe, are M83 mortars. This one right here is a 60 millimeter WP smoke shell from about Vietnam era. This one right here is a World War II German mortar. And then that one right there is a cast dummy mortar used in training. Going on more this way, we have fuses from both Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany. So over here, these are Luftwaffe electrical impact fuses. So basically what an impact fuse was, it was a type of electrical operated fuse used by the Luftwaffe during World War II. The main purpose of it was to detonate bombs upon impact, opposed to a time delay fuse, and it might explode in the air and not on the target like they'd want. So basically an impact fuse, you could see this one here, it almost has a little bit of a button on the top of it, to where if you depress the button, it would push down the initiator and it would then explode your projectile. Over here is Imperial Japanese Ordnance. So down there you can see Imperial Japanese fuses, all kinds, from bigger to smaller. Everything from small, like anti-aircraft type rounds, to bigger 100 millimeter mortar, not 100 millimeter mortar, 100 millimeter projectile rounds. Right here you can see, so the majority of the Japanese fuses used were impact fuses, which means that they needed to impact something in order to detonate. Going over here, this is another assortment, just like up here, of other fuses and items. This right here actually is very interesting. So that is the rocket fins for a hydro rocket, if I can remember correctly. So that is the projectile for a hydro rocket. So this would be connected at the very top of a very long tube. The tube would be filled with propellant, and unfortunately I do not have the tube, but so it'd be this at the very top, a very, very long tube full of rocket propellant, and then at the very bottom would be this fin right here, and it has electrical wires due to the fact of it needed something to initiate the rocket propellant. Going on further over here, this is more of your bigger artillery, your bigger pieces. You got everything from the Shell M48 and with a 75 millimeter projectile to a big German round, most likely an 88 millimeter. No, 88 millimeters bigger. I don't know what that is off the top of my head. I can't remember, unfortunately. These ones over here, they're same size. These were used anywhere from World War II to Vietnam. You got, this one was loaded with TNT. This one is just no marking specifically, just OD plain. Then this one would have been a smoke shell. So in that case, a smoke shell would be packed with something that would be able to, once it is fired, it can let out smoke and indicate where maybe you have to drop a bomb or where your enemy is, stuff like that. This is a grouping of George Robert Caron items. He was the tail gunner on the Enola Gay. He was the one that took one of the most famous pictures of World War II, which is that right here. This is a grouping of signed items, signed photo of him before his death in 1995, signed book that they only made 100 copies of, 100 to 150 copies of, signed business card, and newspaper clippings of his death and when he published his book. Over here, you see some dynamite boxes from the early days of mining and explosives with the DuPont Dynamite Company. A lot of this stuff here over here is local to Colorado, from Laverse, Colorado. This kind of stuff over here is books on, their foundational texts on bombs and bombings. They were the first books of their kind produced in the late to early 1970s and late 1960s. They were for the fire department, bomb disposal, and investigation and police units for them to learn about homemade and crude explosives. Over here is one of the coolest things I probably own. That is a VT proximity fuse. The VT proximity fuse was the first fuse of its kind to utilize the technology of radar transmitters. Basically, in a radar transmitter fuse, it's like echolocation with animals. So instead of having to be a direct hit, if the transmitter senses something, it'll bounce back and it'll explode and detonate the target. One cool thing about this one specifically was this one is also a presentation piece given to W.S. Parsons. William S. nicknamed Deke Parsons. He was an admiral working on the project of the VT fuse. He was instrumental in the developing and the using of the VT fuse. A couple other cool things about him was he was the armor on the Enola Gay. So both him and Bob Caron were on the Enola Gay when they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. He armed it. He took the first ever photo. A couple other things I can point out real quickly is trench art. Trench art is basically a form of expression of a soldier. It is creativity in a dark place. Over here you see a vase for flowers, of course, and an ashtray. So what trench art basically is, it's art that the soldiers made in the trenches when they were almost bored and they had downtime to the next charge. So these were made in the trenches, not these ones specifically, but some of them were made in the trenches with almost people like a nail, just tapping it very, very lightly, creating intricate designs and so forth. Other than that, this is my display. Build for impact, ordnance through time. Thank you.